Welcome to Slice Property Made Possible. This season is powered by New Zealand Home Loans, local mortgage mentors who have been helping Kiwis achieve their financial goals for 27 years with proven results. The thing I love about NZHL is the mortgages are tailored for you with ongoing personalised service, coaching and tools to put you in control. It doesn't end with buying your property, they continue to help you pay down any loans and build your wealth, which can't be said about all advisors. This season, we will be playfully roasting everyday buyers and experts so you can learn from our mistakes. Head to today's episode notes to get access to our free home buyers software and your very own NZHL advisor. Welcome to the show, Hannah. Thanks for joining us.
Thank you. I'm excited to be back.
I know, back 2.0.
I love it.
So tell us a little bit more about your first home buyer journey and we'll go into some of the lessons and learnings that have popped up along the way.
Yeah, cool. So back a few years ago, 2022, I started the journey of building my very first home. So yeah, I managed to build in Waihi, and now I have a 4-bedroom little home that I've rented out to some incredible tenants, and it's fun. It was a big journey, and it was hard. Building is a bit rough.
Yeah,
so, yeah.
We'll dive into that a little bit.
Yeah.
And you had a bit of an unusual arrangement as well in terms of how you came to getting the land. Do you want to dive into that?
Yeah. So I hope my parents don't mind me sharing about this, but they were very generous, very generous, and they did property development. And so what they did is they actually had some property aside to give to me and my siblings for our 21st birthday present, which was very, very kind, and it was something that we weren't expecting at all. So yeah, for our 21st birthday present, we got a share in some land. And so I remember someone came to me and said, because I said to them, I really want my first home by 21. They said, you need to think outside the box.
Yeah.
And I was like, how? And I realised that I had access to land, and so I thought, why don't I buy my siblings out of a piece of one of the sections? So I did, and then that's how I managed to build.
Awesome, and we love to hear about those alternative ways at Slice. Obviously, we get people that are buying by themselves, but we also love supporting those that are finding, as you say, thinking outside the box. So with that arrangement as well, because obviously you had to, pitch to your siblings, work out the term. How did you actually manage that?
Yeah, so I agreed that I was going to pay 1% higher than the term deposit to my siblings, but also it meant that it was cheaper for me. So it was cheaper for me to go through them. So what I did is I didn't actually buy them out and give them the cash, because I didn't have that cash.
Yeah.
So I said, look, can I just borrow that money that I've essentially used? And so it works out really well because they're benefiting, and I'm also benefiting as well. So it's a win-win for both parties.
Yeah, definitely. And it's more so a win for you guys than it is for the bank. So it's nice to be able to do something, without them for once. So obviously they haven't got access to those funds during this period until you pay them back. How do you manage that?
Yeah, so it is a bit rough. So my brother is turning 21 very soon, and so he would like access to his money, so he can go off and do stuff, which is totally fair. So it's been my big hustle for the past year to pay back 100k. So I actually have to save it myself. I can't go to the bank. Because unfortunately, the bank have said no, because I am fresh into being self-employed, so they will not give me a cent. So I managed to pay off $70,000 to my brother, and I've got 30 more to go over the next 5 months.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And so in terms of that arrangement as well, did you set up any agreements or anything?
Yeah, because my sister's a lawyer, so it was all legal documents and stuff, so we signed them, making sure that everyone was happy.
Nice.
Yeah.
And then it just comes down to actually how do you execute on that and make the repayments that you require.
Yeah, totally. We have on the 1st of January is when they get their money. So yeah, I think it all works out well, and we all want to make sure that it's the best for everyone.
That everyone gets that outcome.
Yeah.
But also I guess it's having those legal arrangements so that actually if someone did need that money then and there, or equally, you're unable to pay that money then and there, that you guys actually have something to lean on to kind of support you in making those decisions.
No, totally, because we've got in our document, we've got, how much notice each other has to give.
Yeah.
So that's really important as well. So
Did you have a term as well that you had set out for repayment needs to be made within this period of time? Was that written into the agreement?
I can't quite remember because it was, a few years ago, but I know that they were entitled to get their money whenever they really wanted, but they just had to give me reasonable notice, and then I will do whatever I can in my power to get it to them.
Right.
Yeah.
And obviously that could, like, bit of risk that you've taken on there.
Totally.
In terms of, like, that agreement kind of supports them more than you then, and that, like, you just have to somehow drum up the money.
I know. Like, if my sister said to me, I need 100K right now, and she gives me 3 months or whatever.
She can actually force that.
Yeah,
so she could force sale of the house otherwise.
She literally, it would mean that I'd have to go and get, like, other lending.
Yeah, other lending or sell to give her cash. Yeah,
which she wouldn't do that. But also, that's
the risk though, right?
There is risk,
So kind of just recognising that, there's some risk there that you've taken on.
Totally.
And then you mentioned before around the building piece, that being a bit of a challenge as well. Tell me a little bit more about that lovely journey.
I kind of have, like, mentally tried to block it out of my head because it was just so stressful. Like, it was great, Classic Builders, went with them, they're amazing, but it was so stressful because I didn't know a lot of things about building, and this is the things you don't know, which is why I love Slice, is because there are so many, there's so many elements in the property journey that you just don't know about. So for building, like, this is one kind of example where I didn't know that you could actually be a little bit sneaky and you could buy the letterbox yourself and put it up, and you take that out of the kind of
fees.
Yeah, because they were going to charge me like $2,000 for a letterbox. I was like, I can get that from Mighty Team for $30.
Yeah.
Like, they inflate the prices quite a lot. They don't like to do that, and it's not really something you should be doing. But, I did quite a lot of the stuff. Just getting
close to those numbers, And how did you actually budget that? How did you work out how much you were going to invest in the build?
Well, I guess they gave me, it was a turnkey quote, and so they gave me, like, the full amount, and then we kind of just tried to get it as cheap.
Peel that back,
peel it back, because it was hard.
Because I guess the other thing is you bought it knowing that you were going to tenant it, right?
Mm-hmm.
So did you understand what the rent that you might earn on that build was going to look like?
Yeah, we got it because that was a requirement for the bank, is that we had to have actually a
quote for rent.
Yeah. So I think it came back at a ridiculously cheap amount, and I was like, no, I know that it can be more than that, but it was hard because that's how the bank gave me the lending.
Based off that,
So I think it was like $450 or something for a brand new 4-bedroom home, and so it was like annoying because I was like, no, like, if you look on Trade Me, for $450 you're going to get yourself a 2-bedroom house and like a 1950s home.
Yeah.
So I was like, no, this is brand new. We should be getting more.
So that kind of limited how much you could actually borrow, spend, etc. Yeah. And so you've still got that existing loan in place for the build. Yeah.
So,
which is also why the bank's like, no more for you, Hannah.
But it's so frustrating. This is one thing that I didn't know. So I called up my mortgage broker and said, hey, I would like to, because obviously I got approved for more than what I actually ended up taking.
At the time,
So I said, great, can I just have the rest of the money? And they said, no. And I was like,
no,
well, why not? But I got approved for that. They said, yeah, but you didn't need it, and we're not going to give it to you. And now that you've quit your job, you have to prove to us that you're going to be
5 years.
Well, 2 years, fortunately.
Are they saying 2 now?
Yeah, 2 years. Yeah, it's so frustrating because, like, I was pre-approved for more. Like, I was.
Yeah. Anyway. It's hard when you move into business ownership. That's why you take out all your lending beforehand, which is what I did.
Yeah.
I'm up to my ears in it.
That's smart.
But very intentional. But is it smart, Hannah? Because the cash flow is tight.
Yeah, I can imagine.
But with you, I think that's really interesting because you actually knew that you were tenanting it. You knew that you were going to have to invest in building it to tenant it. Did you run the numbers around actually what the rental yield would look like from an investment perspective?
I think when you look at how much I owe the bank, and then it looks really good, but because I also owe my siblings as well, it's like, oh, actually,
not as good. Yeah,
it is pretty rough.
Yeah,
I don't really think that I don't think it's positive.
It's time for a segment we're calling Roast My Home Hunt. It's time to roast, don't take it to heart. When we learn from your mistakes, we all get smart. Yeah.
So I'm investing a lot of money myself.
Yeah. So did you run those numbers before, or is that kind of something that as you were building, as you worked out what the rent was looking like, that kind of came to fruition?
Yeah, I think so, because there was so many hidden costs as well. I was like, oh wow.
Yeah.
And I was building, in 2022, which was like the peak of how expensive building was. It was so rough.
It was post-COVID, right?
Yeah.
So everything, all the building materials were expensive.
Yes, it was heartbreaking. So I didn't really run it, and it's, it's not the best investment, but it's also, look, I'm in it for the long run.
Yeah, but just thinking, yeah, absolutely. Look, at the end of the day, you're on the ladder. You've done an amazing job to find an alternative way to get there. But it's just thinking back and going, oh, yeah, if I did that again, you'd probably
definitely
be a bit more strategic and think about your rental yield and actually go, well, because rental yield, for those that don't understand, is basically, you can calculate it one of two ways. Either if you've just purchased, it's based on the purchase price, but otherwise it can be, the value of the property. But in your case, it would have been the value of the land plus the cost of the build. That would have been one part of the equation, and then you would have put the rent, expected rent, on top of that. So it would be like your annual rent divided by the value of the land plus the cost of the build would have given you that rental yield. And potentially, we don't have to run the numbers today.
Yeah, I kind of want to now.
Do you want to? We can.
Yeah.
Capital gains, rental yield. So these are the two kind of investment strategies that you should be thinking about when purchasing property. And most buyers don't. Like, they just think, oh, I want to buy a home and I want to live in that home, and hopefully that home, makes money for me. But they're not quite aware of actually, what the investment behind that is. And in your circumstances, it's a little bit trickier as well, because you are building, so there's like these additional costs that you have to take into consideration. Your purchase price would be, in your case, the value of the land at the time, or the cost that you paid your siblings for that land, plus the value of your land, that your section. So say it was it 100k to two siblings, or?
Yeah, so 100k to two siblings.
100k to two siblings, plus let's say there was a third 100k that was your value.
Yeah.
So 300k for that amount. And then loosely, how much did you spend on the build?
Like 450.
Like 450. So that comes in at 750k. And then we won't include rates and insurance and things like that now, because it just gets a bit complicated, but technically to get the net rental yield, you would include that, but we'll do gross rental yield. So what would be the weekly
700.
rent? 700. So it's way better than that 450, right? That was guaranteed.
It did go up as well.
So, and normally you'd say it wasn't going to be tenanted for the whole year. So let's say it's 48 weeks times 700 is 33,600.
Or 3.9.
Yeah. So, 33,600. I'll just confirm that, divided by 750,000. So basically that works out at about a 4.48% rental yield.
Yeah.
Yeah. So it's not bad. We don't have the best rental yield in New Zealand. There's much better countries for that, but we do tend to have more capital gains, and I won't go into detail around that today, but you can basically obviously earn if you go and sell that property in future. And my intuition, I'm just going to do it based on intuition and kind of the stats that I keep an eye on, would say that Waihi actually will perform well from a capital gains perspective. So the other thing that you got to keep in mind is sometimes a low rental yield property can actually do really well at a capital gains perspective, and that means that while cash flow might be very tight for you right now, trying to achieve all those different things, when you go to sell, you may make a couple of $100,000, that kind of thing. So that's kind of the other thing to keep in mind. But it's not to say, oh, I didn't do that. Like, it's still amazing that you're on the ladder, but it's just to say, oh, well, the lesson next time would be maybe to run those numbers so that you know what that cash flow is going to look like.
Totally. And there's so many hidden things like rates. I got rates a few days ago, and I was like, ouch, that hurts. It's so expensive. People don't realise that. I think there are so many.
Real cost of owning the property isn't just the mortgage, it's also rates, insurance. Yeah,
a lot.
Yeah, and so you'd add that into that calculation as well, and that would drop the yield a little bit more as well.
Yeah. It's pretty hard. I'm definitely, I'm paying a hefty amount in interest as well. But fortunately, the interest rates are
coming down.
Going down.
Yes.
But so I am fixed for 1 year with my siblings.
Yeah.
So it's not floating. I'm on back my build. I was one of the last applications to get approved by SB, which was so good because, that is obviously 2% lower than the floating rate. Yeah. So obviously that's really, really nice. And I've got a year longer with that.
Yeah.
So that's good. But fixed is hard because we fixed at a very high rate with my siblings. So.
But then it also gives you certainty. So it's like, at the time you thought you could afford that. but then it's
Yeah.
then it's just now it could be cheaper.
Yeah.
But the other thing around that as well is I think if you're looking at a build and thinking about whether or not that's a good investment, it sounds like you were quite, prudent and tried to reduce the cost by doing your own letterbox and things like that. But people can get into the danger of actually over investing in the build and not running those numbers. So like every 10 grand that you put in more, that reduces that yield figure. So it would have been, instead of 750k, that's 760, 800k. Very quickly, you add features that you enjoy or you get emotional about the way that you're designing and developing and try and move a little bit bespoke. That does massively impact that rental yield and therefore your return on investment, which in everyone's use case, like it is your first home, but it's also an investment. It's also a big part of your wealth journey, right?
Yeah.
So you want to be looking at what is the return that you're going to get on that. And
Yeah, totally.
yeah. But it's really interesting to hear that you didn't quite run those numbers, and ultimately I'm not mad at you because I don't think most people do.
I'm actually like surprised at myself for not really doing it. Maybe I did, back ages ago.
Yeah.
But yeah, I know that it came out a lot more expensive. I think when I first initially went into it, I was expecting the bill to be $350 because I got my quotes and I was going to do just a real cheap, a cheap home. And then I realised that I needed actually to build something was going to last.
Yeah, so the other key learning there is when the builder says 350, Hannah, they don't mean 350.
No,
they mean
don't.
inflate that.
Yeah.
I think it's actually pretty safe to whack 20% on whatever the builder says, particularly if it's not your area of expertise, because those quotes just tend to grow and grow and grow.
Yeah, no, totally.
But what due diligence on that note did you do when it came to choosing the builders?
I think I just wanted to go with a company that was well known, well loved, and also it did come down to the cost as well.
And I think it's an interesting one, but you do talk to people, you talk to friends and stuff like that, but also sometimes you need to kind of talk to the experts to find that right outcome.
Totally.
It's really interesting thinking about builders because my partner's an engineer and he talks about how they quote for work, like how the big four kind of quote for work. And there is a known kind of provider in New Zealand that's actually I think they're an Australian company, but he was just saying the other day they actually well underquote to get the job. Wow. And then they just whack it on top. Wow. So that's the other thing you've got to be careful about. Like if you're looking at hidden what costs. Looks like the cheapest thing. Yeah, hidden costs. I mean, we talk about it with our platform Slice as well, where we've got fixed legal fees.
Yes.
And that's providing some certainty. And when you look at other people's websites, they'll say like from, this number, but then it's like an hourly legal rate. And we've had people, as sad as it may sound, like one of my... It was like a friend of a friend's like came through the platform and was like, oh, like we've used your broker, we've used the educational resources and all the tools, but we're going to use this lawyer over here. And this was quite early on in the platform. And I was like, oh, yeah, okay, like I'll be interested to actually see how this goes. Dropped like an extra $1,500 to $2,000 with that lawyer because they said from. So this is the thing. Like,
well, it was like what I was telling you that I spent $4,000 on legal fees.
Yes.
And I didn't even buy a house. It was just land and the whole like build.
Yeah.
4,000. I look back and I'm like, I want to cry.
Gnarly. But yeah, you don't know what you don't know.
Yeah.
But that's where, people can learn from that lesson. Like there is actually a massive amount of value in transparency and fixed fees as opposed to going cheapest sometimes isn't the best best outcome, and that could be similar. I don't know much about your builders, but keep that in mind, that maybe the first quote, just because it's the cheapest doesn't mean it's going to end up the cheapest.
Totally. And another thing what you can do is they get contractors, so they actually they will contract to their preferred landscaping or like the fences and stuff. So we had a lot of retaining work to be done, and so they quoted us a really ridiculous rate, and I said, no, I could do it myself. In hindsight, would I have done that? Probably not. Unfortunately, long story short, there was so many fights and there was about $10,000 worth of money that needed to be owed, and we were all fighting who owes it because long story, but basically the power got shut off from my house when the day my tenant was meant to move in.
Oh no.
She couldn't move in, and the power shut off, and they said, the people from the engineering place said, it's because your subcontractors put in a fence over top of the lines. You need to dig up the whole fence. They dug up the whole fence, which cost so much money, realised that it wasn't punctured. The lines weren't punctured. They were completely fine. But still, someone had to pay to dig up the fence and to put it back again. So we fought a massive fight with a very big energy company, and I won. I won because it wasn't my problem. So fortunately I saved $10,000 they paid, but it was a huge fight, and it's something that when I was going through it, this was 6 months of fighting.
That's so emotional,
Yeah, and it's like, being, threatened to take them to court because you're like...
Did you have builder's insurance as well yourself, or was that just managed by the developer? So I guess there's some real challenges there, and some opportunities to explore ways to avoid that.
It's just like the craziest time of my life. So definitely.
Sorry to take you back to that. I mean, you're on the couch. It's like a little bit of therapy.
I know it is.
Sometimes it's good to share your
my
trauma. And process it.
Yeah.
Not lock it away, which is what
I know. I feel like I'm digging it up, and I'm feeling things now.
But on another note, just to double down on that, I mean, I know you've now got some great tenants in there, but I do know that you didn't have the best history with tenants as well. Do you want to share a little bit about that?
Yes, so my tenant, it was actually like 3 weeks ago to the year. So a year ago, a few weeks ago. Basically, my tenant asked if they could leave the fixed term early. Yeah. And I was like, you know what, that's okay. Yeah. Let's go for it. So I said yes, and what had happened is she had organised flatmates and said, hey, the flatmates want to stay on. So I said, great, amazing. So she's like, so can we end the fixed term early, then you'll just start the new contract with the new tenants. Great, happy days. So I did that, but she owned all of the furniture. And so she decided, I don't know how, don't know why, that she didn't like me. And I had done nothing wrong to her, she was a really good tenant. I didn't realise until after she moved out there was actually a lot of stuff that she didn't tell me that was going on in that house. A lot of people coming and going, too many people under the tenancy agreement. But essentially she moved out and she was very rough with all the walls and the furniture. So every single wall in my brand new house had been severely damaged to a total of like over $10,000 of damage. So I walked in.
That seems intentional.
It was. Imagine like scrapes and scratches, things on the roof. It was heartbreaking to walk into your house. You're like, this is a brand new house, 1 year old, and every single wall is damaged. I couldn't find one wall. There was one room that one of the boys lived in that was perfect.
It's crazy to think you had insurance, because for those that don't realise, if you do tenant your first home or any home for that matter, it's not covered under general insurance, so you have to change to landlord insurance. So at least you had that, but also I'm devastated to hear how difficult that process was for you.
Oh, huge. They just didn't want to pay, but we worked out it was 3 excesses. So I think I ended up paying. So obviously the bond didn't cover it, so I still was at a loss. But I was like, do I take her to court for, $500 of the water care and $400 that I'm at a loss? Or do I just go, you know what? You be gone, bless you, and let's just move on.
Yeah. Sometimes you have to let things go, right? Like, not just from a financial perspective, from an emotional, like, well-being. Like, if you had to go through the court process after doing all of that anyway.
It's also forgiving her as well internally.
Yeah, so I mean, obviously, now you've got better tenants in, but quite a few lessons uncovered today, Hannah. So when it comes to, I guess, buying that first home, how important it is to
run your numbers,
get close to your investment strategy, actually pick an investment strategy. I think that's part of it. We take people through the different strategies in our course. It's on early bird pricing is $499. I'll drop the link in today's episode notes. But actually just getting clear on what the different strategies are and then picking one, or just running the numbers and having a sense of how that property does perform, because yes, it's your first home if you're purchasing to live in it, but also it is an investment and it is a big part of your financial wealth journey. So definitely running those numbers if you could go back in time, and then also probably being a bit more realistic around the cost to build. I think maybe less trusting of the building companies around what those quotes are, and then Gosh, I mean, you had insurance. You did the right things from a landlord perspective, I think. But what would your lesson be there? Would it be to potentially,
I think,
vet differently?
Vet the tenants better. Yeah. So she, unfortunately, her references, once I had her on, I realised that they were biased and they weren't actually legit references. I then spoke to someone else who knew her and said she lies, everything's a lie, everything she told me was a lie. So that was heartbreaking, and also knowing that so many people were in the house. She had bunk beds in 4 bunk beds in each room, and I never saw it.
Quite disrespectful.
And I fortunately, this is biggest tip ever, is if you are a landlord, you need to make sure that you have proof that you visited the property and inspected it every 3 months. I was able to prove to them that all those damages happened in one go, because 3 months ago there was nothing, and then after 3 months there was everything.
Yeah, you don't learn that stuff until you're kind of going through a claims process. But I think it's very valuable to learn from these lessons. So thank you for being vulnerable and sharing some of the challenges that you experienced.
I haven't shared this with anyone, so I feel privileged.
I should feel privileged, you mean? I feel privileged. And the audience should as well, because it is that opportunity for people to learn from our lessons.
People think, oh wow, I get criticism all the time, oh look, you've got an investment property at such a young age, all this, how easy it is. They don't realise that I spent, months crying, going, everything's going wrong, my tenant's done this, thousands of dollars,
the reality behind the reality. What looks like, here's my first home. Actually, there was all this sacrifice, and then even once they got it, these things went wrong. I mean, we just don't know what's going on, right? But also, it's just a reminder that actually what's probably more valuable for our listeners as well is actually hearing about what goes wrong. It's great to hear that you're in a home and you're killing it, but also what are the things that didn't go well, and how can we avoid them? How can the audience avoid them? That's what's really valuable. So thank you for being vulnerable and sharing that. And when it comes to the backlash that I know you've received sometimes around that being a property investment, at the end of the day, you've just bought your first home somewhere else and you're paying rent like anyone else.
Rent vesting.
Rent vesting. So it's a very common way to get on the ladder, and it is an easier way to get on the ladder when you can't afford in the major cities where you potentially need to work.
And I'm very privileged to be in a position where I can. Obviously had the help from my parents, so very grateful for that, and also very grateful that I had saved up that money and was able to get that approval by myself. So definitely come from.
The thing that privilege is definitely a leg up, but I think the other thing that people need to think about is just how to get curious. If that's not your leg up, if that's not something that you've got as an option for you, what is your option? Is it buying with friends? Is it exploring a government scheme? It's about getting curious instead of green.
And also saving, I saved $80,000.
There was still hard work, even though you had that support, and I think that's really important because so many people actually do get support from their parents now. I saw a TikTok or something the other day, and I reposted it being this annoys me, because they were taking the piss out of people that have bought a house and then had help from the parents. And obviously my first time I had help too. I actually could have bought by myself, but I wanted to stretch and buy a bigger property and better property. So I leveraged and my mum took some benefit. There's other episodes on that. But I think what's important is actually encouraging people to find that option and creating transparency around how people are really getting in. Because if people think that it's super easy to do by themselves, or if people think that everyone's doing it by themselves, then that actually stops many people from trying, because they go, oh, well, I definitely can't do it by myself, so there's no point in trying. Whereas if they go, hang on, about 60% of people are doing it with help, well, I guess I'm part of that 60% then. I need someone to go in with.
That's important.
Wicked. Well, we have our last question for you, Hannah.
Oh, I'm intrigued.
You should already know this one, but if your first home had a doorbell and that doorbell played a theme song, what song would it play?
It would have to be the Friends theme song. Da 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 da.
Thank you for joining our community. Please leave an Apple or Spotify review and provide feedback so we can improve our podcast for you. We really appreciate it. Check out the links in today's episode notes to get access to our free resources and your own NZ Home Loans financial advisor. On that note, a quick reminder, Slice the podcast does not provide financial advice as we're not taking into account your personal circumstances. However, when you join our platform, we have a team of partners like New Zealand Home Loans ready to provide you with financial advice free of charge.